I'm sitting here with Stuart Dean, who's Chief Executive for ASEAN for GE. And we're going to talk about power needs in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, where there are a lot of power-hungry economies. Stuart, welcome.
Jeremy, glad to be here.
Now, obviously, everybody knows that ASEAN is a relatively dynamic region, but it's also an incredibly diverse region. As a broad brush, how are power needs being met across Southeast Asia?
So you've got countries like Singapore and Malaysia with very high reserve margins, but most of the other countries operate at somewhere between 0 and 10% reserve margins. Only 75% of the 600 million plus population in ASEAN are connected to electricity today. So huge needs for growth, particularly in Indonesia, Myanmar, and other countries.
Are the countries where those so-called, these reserve requirements, as you say, reserve margins, I should say, quite low, are they doing enough to rectify that?
I think they're not moving fast enough. I think they recognize the need to move fast, but there are a lot of challenges. Financing the power projects, bidding out these power projects with good governance and transparency, and also making sure that they don't buy the cheapest products on the market, recognizing that these projects need to last 25 to 30 years. And so you need quality equipment that can be maintained over that period of time. But I think they're heading in the right direction, and the good governments get it and are putting plans in place to develop that infrastructure.
Now, where would you put the good governments? Who's getting it right? Who's behind in the pack?
Well, I think if you look at where the zero reserve margins, clearly that's not being addressed fast enough. Myanmar is a great example. We're working very closely with the government of Myanmar to help them think through what their short, medium, long-term power plans are, how to leverage the resources that they have, which are very good for hydro, and long-term very good for gas. But in the short term, they've got to figure out some other solutions until the new gas comes on stream. I think Indonesia, very slow this year, partially because of the political transition. I'm pretty optimistic with the new government in place that they'll start accelerating the growth of the power sector in Indonesia. Philippines, a lot of debate over there about the need for an emergency power decree. It doesn't look like that will happen. So I'm a little concerned about whether they're going to be able to address the power needs in the Philippines in the short term.
And in the Philippines, if they don't, the Philippines has been the star performer in ASEAN. How much of a risk is there that that growth might hit a serious road bump, specifically because of power?
I think it affects investors' plans, whether they're foreign or domestic investors. If it doesn't look like they're going to be able to get enough power, that will slow down investment.
What about a country like Vietnam, which has been grappling with power needs for a very long time? You've obviously you've had experience for a long time. Are there any lessons in a country like Vietnam, perhaps turning back to Myanmar, which is just starting out on this road?
I think Vietnam's done a pretty decent job. I mean, they're fortunate to have a very centralized government, so they can make decisions, not have to worry about getting it through Parliament, and almost 100% of the population is connected to electricity grids. And they've got a diversified energy supply. So they've got significant hydro resources, coal-fired, gas-fired power plants, and now beginning to develop wind.
Now, in countries like Myanmar and Vietnam, obviously governments are constrained in terms of their budget. So the public purse is not necessarily deep enough to pay for the highly capital-intensive infrastructure and equipment needed to get power going. What's the solution to this? Because, ultimately, if it can't be paid for, then it's not going to happen.
There are challenges, no doubt. But I mean, one of the things that really blew me away was there were 4 companies that invested in power plants without a power purchase agreement in Myanmar 2 years ago. So there's an appetite to invest to solve these needs in the private sector. And so the key is, I think, for the governments to put the right framework, governance, and incentives in place so that the private sector can help solve these problems in the power sector.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.